Welcome to intx, where we have career conversations in tech. Today is episode 10. We have on Davide Pollicino. Davide is currently a software engineer at Microsoft, a top mentor at Mentor Cruise, as well as being a technical writer. He actually only graduated from university last year. He's been highly active in the right communities with internships at both JP Morgan and Microsoft, as well as volunteering throughout his time at Edinburgh Napier studying computer science. As someone finding success so early out of uni, I thought it'd be great to share his tips as both a student and a mentor. So, Davide, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the intro as well.
No, not a problem. So, with the show, we start as early as is relevant. So that could be school, that could be a childhood memory of technology. As early as is relevant for you.
Yeah. If you wish, I can just reiterate on what you just said, basically, in terms of background of where I come from. I'm Italian as well. I've been studying in Edinburgh Napier University in Scotland, a computer science background, which I have to be honest, is not different than software engineering, at least for their specific modules or preparations or course structure from that point of view. Just a small notes about the JP Morgan internship. That one was a virtual internship. It means that a few companies, even big tech one, included JP Morgan or even Microsoft as well, just provide a kind of mock-up project where you're able to understand which kind of technologies they work with. They also have a dedicated section to better understand the kind of company value, mission culture as well, just to give you some kind of more hints in terms of help you out evaluate if that specific environment, industry, or even company itself can be one of your options when you're going to apply for an internship or for a new graduate role, which is a new role straight after uni, basically, as a junior entry level career.
Yeah, so studying computer science at Edinburgh Napier in Scotland, I suppose two main questions there would be one, computer science or software engineering, is that something you always wanted to do? How did you make the decision of choosing that for your degree?
It was fairly easy for me because, like in Italy, we have many types of school with stronger verticalizations into specific fields. So you have industrial field, which they break down in IT and telecommunication, or mechatronics, or electronics, or even in chemistry, or more oriented to scientific research, or even hospitality, for example. And already from secondary school, I was studying IT and telecommunications, which also give you some kind of background and basics against algorithms, structures, networking, system design overall. And for me, it was kind of natural to do then that transaction to the university, where I was just keep studying what picked up my attention since secondary school.
Did it just so happen that your secondary school was focused around that engineering base? Or did you have the option?
I could choose any kind of school. That's not kind of issues from that point of view. You don't have hard cut selection based on the grades that you have received early on in your student career, I would say. It was a kind of experiment for me because the first 2 years of secondary school are quite generic in terms of sharing the biggest majority of subject, even chemistry, physics, and so on. So eventually, if you realize somehow that that specific path that you have chosen is not the right one for you or does not fit your new career goals, you are able to just switch into any other course without getting any new exam. But for me, it was picking up some strong interest into algorithm data structures. Also, my school was starting to participate into competitive programming Olympics in team or individual. So already from the second year, I had some kind of introduction to these topics that were more focused on computing science. I decided to stick in for the rest of the secondary school and then keep going with the university, going to studying in Scotland.
Right. Yeah, and then why Scotland?
Why Scotland? Pre-Brexit, if you were a European student, likely you don't have to pay any kind of university taxes. So it means that the only thing you had to manage was your own living cost, pay up the rent, food, and so on. And I said, why not? Why not? It's never been there before, actually. And of course, as an Italian coming up with a degree, even with a bachelor degree from a UK-based company, would potentially have given me also some kind of extra points during the application process in Italy itself, just by proving other further communication skills and so on. So that was one of the core reasons, just starting to enrich my CV, even to actually building one or writing one for the first time.
Yeah, so when I looked on LinkedIn, you have like so much stuff that you're up to. As in, when I was writing the intro and looking at seeing that you just graduated uni last year, it was crazy to see how much stuff you've done. Have you always came from the perspective of, as you're doing, like writing your CV before you've even, building out your CV before you've even written it? Have you always came with that perspective?
I knew I had the feeling that the world is getting always more competitive and competitive. Then I got the proof as well during the end of the first year when my grades were actually quite good. I got an interview with Amazon for one of their internship as a software engineering, and I failed. I failed completely. I was like, oh wow, there is this weird mismatch between industry expectations and what I'm studying and what my grades actually are telling to me right now. So I said, cool, it's time to do something else, basically. And that's why I started to redistribute, I would say, my effort between university and personal learning and other jobs, part-time or full-time jobs, and collaborations opportunities. And I got lucky as well for my first ever job as an entry-level product manager for a web agency based in London. And from the second year, I started to work basically full-time. And since then, even by luck, I would say, I haven't stopped to work and tried out a different kind of environment between startup or corporate like Microsoft, and even between roles as product manager and software engineering.
Yeah. So it seems then that interview for Amazon helped build you into realizing what was actually out there in the real world and how your skills in uni was translating.
Not it wasn't the answer for everything which was needed, because then every role, every new organization, so you have that learning curve to approach. But it was an alarm for me to say, all right, maybe 90+% in your exam result does not really mean everything if you're able to get to the interview but not pass one. Does it make sense? And then after 2 or 3 jobs, your scores or the university which come from does not really matter. So it just matters actually where you have been or what you have done from that point of view. What was your impact? So I focus more on increasing my possibility to have a wider range of interviews, but at the same time be able to pass them or at least discuss an offer and so on. And that's why I decided to start to build up a basically more technical background. University is still strongly academia oriented, of course. Does not matter even if you do software engineering, which theoretically should be very hands-on approach. I always got the feeling that even at bachelor level, you are always preparing potentially yourself for eventual PhD and so on. And I got the proof when I was starting to work into software engineering assignments, try to do the extra mile in terms of development, design, analysis, automation of the tests, and so on. And lecturers were just complaining about the fact that I didn't explain what a unit test, for example, was, or a pipeline was, and so on. I was like, why you were cutting off my marks just because I haven't explained what it is, instead to appreciate what I've done in terms of extra mile for a topic which you're not even treating and so on, but that is extremely relevant and needed for any kind of job, even for a new graduate software engineering. I knew back at the time that I didn't want to do any PhD. I will potentially do a master. I would love to do one in business administration, probably more focused to business, definitely. But I knew the PhD was not my goal, so I said, cool, let's elaborate actually what is the kind of effort that I need to put between getting the bachelor degree and passing out even successful with a certain kind of degree, but at the same time extend my professional network, try to do something else, explore different things, and fail as many times as I can while I'm still inside uni. That's the most
Yeah,
important thing.
no, definitely, and I think that like fail fast mentality is important at university. Um, you can take some of your university time as time to relax and chill, but you should take it as time to explore. And I'm noticing that more so now. Now I'm out of university when you're like trying to, because for instance, after my computer science degree, I then done a master's in management. Went into project management, realized I did not like that at all. Living in Excel. So then I was trying to find stuff, and I've ended up in a DevOps engineering role. And then I'm doing this, and I've tried other stuff, but it's getting exponentially harder to try other things, both from the mindset of like you can't help but have that career ladder mindset and what you want to do. So, like for me, moving from management and back into engineering, you're kind of like, oh, have I just wasted a year? And then side hustles and stuff, responsibility. It's definitely people should cherish that time at university.
Absolutely, absolutely. More you go forward with your life in general, which means increase of fixed cost, responsibility towards I don't know, a partner or family, for example, and so on. Harder is to actually be able to trade off a risk with possible future opportunities. So while you're still at uni, try to build your own idea. Try to work with people who have their own idea as well. Try to understand what are the main red flags, what you want to have in terms of environment where you wish to work with, or where you don't want to wish with to work with. Sorry, try to get as many red flags you can. Try to even experience, I would say, hedge experience like burnout, for example. I don't wish anyone to have burnout, but the best way to get to know yourself, how your body reacts to certain stress levels and so on, is to probably experience one and to test your limits in order to better observe yourself and avoid those kind of situations in the near future, which may impact in the longer term your career in a negative way, I would say.
Yeah,
Even block
definitely.
you
That's
sometimes.
something I hadn't thought about, but it touches home really well. Is that you do create behaviors when you're trying to make these deadlines at uni, which then you see yourself replicating when you're not at uni, when you're still kind of stressed slash burnt out. And yeah, had I known that I was anticipating that at university, I'd be able to identify this and try and like either A, not make these neural patterns occur and try and like make it more positive, say, or I would just try and avoid it or even just
Absolutely.
analyze it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But so when you're talking in, to bring it back to university, second year at Amazon, you realised that what you were learning in your degree wasn't everything you had to know. How did you then redirect that energy? Did you continue to go above and beyond in learning, or did you then try and get kind of like side projects?
I have to be honest. As I said, I had to reevaluate the kind of effort that I was putting in effort. So I didn't quit because still having a bachelor degree, at least in a market which gets always more competitive and competitive, is extremely good. And at the same time, I saw university as a timeline where I could fail many things. So I was getting two things at the same time from that point of view. I started to redistribute my energy and try to give priorities in according to what I believe was going to give actually the biggest impact in my medium term and long term. If there was any module which was treating, for example, data science, and I had the feeling that I didn't want to be a data scientist, at least back at the time, I would follow the course, but not give 100% of me, or from that point of view, or try to instead redirect my energy and my time to something else. Instead, I was focusing on getting as many experience you can and building up as many connections I could, so that I could understand, first of all, what other people struggled with even before me when they went straight outside of uni after graduations. I built up a strong networking with people who are already working in certain environments like big tech companies, or people who are working in extremely competitive environments like finance, for example, or banking. So what happens was that I was trying to collect all this feedback and then learning as much I could in order to satisfy at least what were the first expectations for a new graduate role. I got my first job as product manager in web agency in London. Even if the role was as product manager, I knew, at least, maybe I may be biased a little bit, I strongly believe that a project manager should always have a technical background. Does not mean that even if you don't have to actually code or invest time coding, you should be able to not just help your team in terms of scheduling, organizations, review of the timelines, and so on, or even taking care of your members. You should always try to redirect at least your team members to the best possible resource, even in terms of learning and progressions and so on, in order to optimize not just the process of the development of the project which you're taking care of, you're in charge of, but to help also your team members to further grow up within their careers. So at the same time, while I was a product manager, I was assigning myself coding tasks, and under the hood, I was coding as well, and struggles with many things at the same time, and getting positive lessons out of it, learning opportunities out of it as well.
So, as a product manager, what was your main responsibilities? Is that just looking at the timeline and?
No, as product manager, basically, we were actually 3 people as in-house employee, which meaning that there were 3 people that were constantly part of the company, and we were mainly hiring freelancer based between UK and Italy to work with us to satisfy our clients' requirements that were located within those 2 countries itself. So first of all, when a project request come in, or we start discussions with a certain client, we'll still have not hired actually freelancers that are going to work on that. So what happens that first I needed to break down actually the client requirements, understand possible timelines in terms of development, knowing a certain set of developers and engineers which have collaborated with us already, try to estimate actually what a possible development cost actually could be, taking under considerations average of European market, so that if one of my collaborators, freelancers, software engineers that was located in Italy was not longer available, at least I had enough budget to source another one, for example, in Spain, in France, or any other country. So I was first of all breaking down the requirements, manage first expectations, do first kind of analysis of what was possible and not possible according to the client markets. Always play a little bit on that kind of trade-off probably in any project I've been working on. And once I've provided actual estimations and the development cost, the business manager would actually have on top of it some kind of fees that the company take as a partial earning. Once the project would kick off, there was another person that was in charge of the recruiting pipeline, so at least collecting some CV that I was going to review. Then I was participating to actually reviewing the CVs and getting called to truly evaluate the past experience actually of the candidate itself. So this helped me massively for behavioral questions because I knew I had the feeling if someone was lying or if someone under the hood was at the same time outsourcing the project or development tasks to another cheaper options. So probably, a collaborator which was probably based on another country like Pakistan and so on. So it was fairly easy even to get confidence in terms of trying to, I would say, quickly judge another person from that point of view. But once this kind of agreement was reached, there was all the part of requirements, dependencies-based analysis, and upon that there was kind of planning to distribute the work between front-end development, back-end development, and mobile. As 70% of the projects I've been working on, there were also mobile applications associated to that. So there were two kind of teams moving in parallel from that point of view. And then, of course, apart from planning, planning usually happens in intensive phase at the start of the project, or if something goes extremely bad from that point of view, and you need a complete review of distributions of priorities and effort. I was participating during the quiet time to development and quality assurance as well. So as the feature were coming in, as we were merging new code and so on, I was apart from our automated tests, I was also playing with it, just trying to evaluate the final user experience. Once everyone within the company was happy with what was produced, we were just getting a call with the clients, organizing a demo if this were scheduled already, or eventually going an internal release.
So that variety of tasks, interacting with people quite a lot, how do you think that affected you as a software engineer? Did it give you a more strategic point of view?
It affects me a lot. It's definitely easier if you have already a wide and complete overview about how the project is going to look like. In the next 2 or 3 months, because this allows you to quickly forecast actual dependencies. And if something goes wrong in terms of development from a single team member and so on, which is not be able to commit on that task, or the task is simply getting more time than expected and so on. If you have already that kind of mapping of dependencies, you are able to quickly estimate and understand actually what the contexts are going to be for any other team members or for the final development itself. So this allowed me to understand, especially when joining Microsoft, that the biggest priority is to get to know the project as much as you can from different point of view, even from telemetry, reliability, actual main code base where you're working on or spending most of the time and so on. Because the most important thing is, I believe, to have a complete overview of the tools that are in place, the processes that are in place. Of course, Microsoft is a huge example. Teams is a huge project. Still after 6 months, I'm learning a lot on a daily basis and so on. But the main things, and probably even what I've started to apply in the last few months, especially once joining here Microsoft, is that sometimes it's good to do not spend 8 hours a day coding. Spending, for example, 7 hours coding and spending the 8th hour to try to understand how you can do better the next day, for example, overall. Once you have the overall view about all the kind of tools and pipelines and processes and members and teams that are collaborating with you, you're also even able to propose new ideas, which may actually improve the development effort. And this is something which, of course, from a leadership team perspective, I believe is appreciated, because you are not just an executor. You are not just one of the thousands of software engineers who daily complete tasks, probably even more than you, probably even better than you and so on, but you have attentions for that small details, which says, all right, this is the room for improvement. I'm going to suggest that. Let's see how many people react to it, and let's analyze actually the current impact and schedule some effort in order to achieve that.
Yeah, because it also blends itself into, because as you're saying, other people will be doing maybe more, maybe better, but that's where you get your unique impact as well. But also, I think for a company that it can make you more productive. As a previous podcast, I talked to Max Dickinson, and he was talking about how sometimes the most productive person is the person who says you don't have to do any work. So they're the person where, initially you could look at the task and be like, I've got this task I need to complete. Oh, excuse the cat. I've got this task I have to complete. The other person could say, oh, well, you have to kind of take a step back and try and see if it maybe overlaps with something else. But then the most productive person comes in and it's like, it's a feature, not a bug type thing.
No, this is Absolutely right. That's absolutely right. And especially in fast evolving project, sometimes it's good. If you're just analyzing and taking care of the real current priorities instead to try to manage everything at the same time. Actually, it's happened during this last couple of weeks. I had some kind of job planned for the next incoming sprint for the next 2 weeks, which are going to start from this Monday, and. At the end of the day, I find out just by even analyzing actually what my colleagues were working on that already there was some developer who was taking care of the same tasks which I had to work on, and then by participating to a meeting with a leadership team, I found out that the next 3 weeks, what I would have done would be basically almost useless because this would accommodate other new features and so on. So it would need a little bit more structured refactory, I would say, from that point of view. So yeah, having as much you can actually for what is allowed within your position, a longer term view and a broader view of what is happening and what is going to happen in terms of customer feedback analysis, in terms of development effort and so on, definitely give you an advantage in terms of avoiding that, you do something and then the next day is completely erased by something else or partially erased by something else.
Yeah. And so taking that same strategic outlook, did you apply that same way of thinking to your career? Had you thought that you were going to be in the position you are now when you began uni, for instance?
You mean like specifically now in terms of role, name, and kind of company where I'm working on?
Yeah. Was that like a
There
5-year
was
plan
there.
type thing?
It was part of the plan. I didn't know that I would end up at Microsoft.
Yeah.
I also told to my manager actually before COVID. I knew already I wanted to be in this kind of product-based Big Ten company and so on. And I had a kind of personal ranking of preferred company, so that if I would be lucky enough to get multiple offers at the same time, I would have chosen between one compared to another's. But then it's happened that COVID hit, and I've seen that among all the big companies, Microsoft was the one that already literally every 2 weeks was rolling out huge features. Especially me as a student who was impacted by working remotely and so on. I've seen Teams itself growing massively, on a monthly basis, having breakout room, improving performances, improving the blurring effect and so on. And at the same time, this company was self-reorganizing itself as all the other Big Ten companies. And they were starting to keep going with acquisitions of video games, basically, or even video game development companies. So I've seen that when it was really needed, Microsoft was the one that was, at least at that time, be able to react better than all the others. And that's how it actually ranked up into my favorite Big Ten companies. And luckily, December 2020, so a few months after the start of the lockdown, at least in the United Kingdom, I signed up an internship offer with Microsoft for the summer 2021. I completed this internship fully remote, working from the Microsoft Prague office, but working actually by London, where I was located at that time. And once completed the internship, I got a return offer to come back as full-time employee within the same team.
Oh, brilliant. And so then, what advice would you give to someone who is looking for a mentorship at like a large tech company such as Microsoft?
Sorry, for a mentorship itself?
No, sorry, for a role.
For a
at
role.
Microsoft.
For a role.
Yeah.
Independently if it's Microsoft or not.
Big
Try
tech.
to understand which real product or business area is actually providing profits for the company itself. Even if you are within the same huge company like Google, like Microsoft, like Apple, and so on, not all the departments, not all the products are that kind of mainstream for the company as well. That means that in terms of if a kind of external factor may impact actually their own share prices, for example, or there is some kind of regressions in terms of profit itself, which leads to a layoff. The first environment, the first sub-organizations which are going to be impacted are the one where actually that actually are not that important for the company, or at least don't have that kind of priority or profit generations share. So try to do not just hope to get in and sit there and until someone will probably lay off or fire you and so on. Try to scale up within the company, but if you believe that you started in a specific product or team which is not that mainstream or impactful, at least within the company, try to find your way to change team.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice for people who are just leaving uni and trying to get a grad job. Because I know, for instance, with my role, when I left to go into project management, I didn't have a particular interest in it. It wasn't a function. It felt like something that I should go in as opposed to something that I particularly wanted to go into. Management generally was interesting, but like project management down at the analyst level isn't particularly interesting. But I had noticed then when I went in and I was within a team, like an operations team, instead of being a billable team, but I had came into the company thinking, I'm now in the company. Like, I'm in the pool, I'll figure my way over to where I want to be. But then you realize when you get in, you're actually kind of stuck where you got in. So what you thought was like a slight opening the door to then get in, it was a massive opening. It just was going the complete wrong direction, and it just has the right brand above it, which I found quite disheartening once I was in. So yeah, definitely follow stuff that you want to do. But specifically then in actually getting in, what advice would you give for someone applying?
Try to provide as much you can actually indications of the fact that you have real passions and interested towards what you're doing. You're not just one of the millions of software engineers applying. You're not just one of the millions of students which is applying. Even volunteer activities sometimes can extremely be helpful from that point of view. Apart from, a couple of full-time jobs, a virtual internship with JP Morgan and so on, there were a couple of key points in my CV that I believe got to the eye of the recruiter itself, which were Geeks for Geeks Campus Ambassador, which is an Indian company extremely famous for algorithms, structures, preparations, and so on. Actually, many people who now works in any big tech company, originally they were preparing or using Geeks for training purposes, or they were working at this company itself.
Using that myself.
So what I was doing, I was basically organizing some coding challenges. I was organizing a couple of workshop, within my classmates itself. I was trying to do some kind of extra mile to share a little bit of knowledge from that point of view. In returns of basically nothing, probably some discount codes for courses that I was going to use myself, and I got the same experience for Microsoft ambassador program, which of course it's already a kind of keyword matching for your CV. You got Microsoft already once. It shows, I believe, strong interest within the company itself, because there are other companies who are organizing similar campus programs or opportunities. It was trying to prove that I really wanted to have an impact for others, not just for myself. And already at the time, I had some GitHub repository, probably one of them, which was competitive programming wide, where I was just sharing my notes and my coding solutions as well, which I believe at the time had like more than 500 stars or something. And I said to the recruiter, oh, by the way, I also got this, completely free. I'm not building any course after that. And she was impressed by the numbers. So she was like, oh, wow, yes, you're doing that exactly for having an impact on others. And I was working also as a lab. That was quite a lot. That was the most intensive period of my life. I was also working as lab demonstrator within the university, which basically works on the fact that if you have completed, for example, the third year, you are able to help any students from the first and second year for their coding assignment. So I was getting exposed to all different kind of subjects, coding assignments, that were changing year after year, and I really enjoyed that part of helping others. Especially at Napier University, which is very international from that point of view. Many times people do not each other. It's not like the same friends that went in the same high school, primary school, high school, and then went together into university. People that are literally coming from any corner of the world. So very often you are lonely by yourself. And it's good, extremely nice and rewarding to be that, the fixed point where people could go in to ask some questions if they were struggling with any kind of coding assignment. And this was driving a little bit of interest in terms of learning new topics, as the lab demonstrator is open basically to the entire school of computing, not just to the direct course which I've been working on. So if there was a person from security asking, for example, just for advice how to use a specific library, or with Python, for example, we could just have us sit together and try to figure it out basically together. That was the core things there. And I believe that was one of the triggers as well on letting me realizing that I really enjoy learning something, but at the same time try to have a positive impact on others, which is preparations wise for interview, or even just fixing a kind of issues which is leading them stress.
Yeah, they definitely seem to have a good motivation behind it, but it also touches on, I think, there's a quote that I had heard the other day from Alex Hormozy, but I'd heard it through Chris Williamson's podcast, where he talks about like the way to get rid of imposter syndrome is to build a stack of undeniable proof behind yourself. And I think that also when you're writing CVs, they always tell you it's like, don't tell it, show it. And I think from what you're saying is that like to get into companies that are highly competitive to get into, you have to be like, this is what I've done. This is the impact I'm making. You can't just say, oh, by the way, I'm really good. You have to show this is all the things that I'm doing and getting into. And also, as
Absolutely.
you touched on, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
And also, I think was going to ask, the helping others, was that the beginning of your journey into mentorship?
It was. First of all, I'm going to reply 1 second to reshare your ideas. I absolutely agree with you. The best way to to showcase your skills, to evaluate yourself, is to have a proof of concept of what you have done, what realistically is there. And especially CV wise, I believe it's extremely not just rewarding, or it does not just incentivize your opportunities to get a one-to-one interview with the hiring manager. If you have already a project which you have been working on, which means that you know actually the structure of the project, the difficulties behind that, and you're able to actually talk about it. If you have a specific asset or project which match the skills required by the HR itself, if you're good enough to upsell yourself and upsell your project, you are going to drive the conversations in order to showcase your skills while describing the project you are comfortable discussing about. This means that you will anyway prove up your skills, but at the same time you will avoid to get asked questions. Instead, you'll tell your story, and you will be more comfortable as well. You will be self-awareness of how things are going, which will decrease a little bit of stress as well, and will probably optimize as well your chances of impressing the other. That was a good point. That's a good point. Helping others. It started probably even earlier than that, because we're doing the first year of university. I got in touch with Lead the Future non-profit mentorship organizations, which helps Italian students who are abroad or in Italy itself, but have a certain kind of goals and curriculum background or interest. And what does mentorship allow me to have is to understand how impactful it is to actually do proper professional and personal networking, because all the people that I've met within those organizations have even today an impact of my life. They helped me even as well to get into Microsoft in terms of sharing their own experience, sharing how they were living actually the company culture itself, and probably just describe me actually what the process of interview would look like. And these people nowadays actually are kind of leaders in their own sector. All of them are working in the same environment in general. But the most mind blowing thing is that I had the opportunity to connect with amazing mentors, leaders of certain industries or companies for free. Like literally out of the blue, driven by the fact that they wanted, as I said, probably to just avoid the others to do the same mistakes that they have done so far. And this was incredible from that point of view, because I know and I still remember what my mentor said to literally help me drive my effort for getting into Microsoft at the end, or just building up my CV and gaining new skills. If I can share small details, personal details, I was, before all of this, before all the kind of works, lab demonstrator, project manager, and so on, I was a student starting from zero. I had some economical issues as well during the first year. So I was working, I believe, 50, 55 hours a week in a bar in the city center of Edinburgh. So realistically speaking, if you are a full-time student studying during the day and afternoon, and then working from, 5 p.m. to 2.5, 3 a.m. and so on, it's quite hard to find the time to do anything else. So the mentor come to me and say, well, David, your background is amazing, your goals are amazing, but realistically speaking, you're never going to achieve them if you don't find the time to actually work on them. So even if you are, you are aiming to saving up some money with just by overworking at the bar and so on, because maybe you're scared to get into your previous situations. Instead, evaluate your financial needs, cut literally your hourly week of work just to literally cover your fixed cost, and invest any other hour on learning, on improving, or building up your CV. And I'll show you that in 3 months internship, you will do way more than what you're doing at the bar in probably 6 or 7 months.
Yeah,
and that was absolutely true. That was absolutely true as well. This kind of advice, as you said, you are at the university. You still think, 3 years ahead of me, 2 years ahead of me, 1 year ahead of me, but I have to focus on the thesis itself, on the honours project, and so on. And then out of the blue, you are out of university, you are seeking for a job, some third part happens. We got, from 2020 to this year, we got COVID, hiring freeze, we got high inflations, which leads to increased overall costs, regressions, which leads to massive layoff, and so on. Realistically speaking, for job seeking, the last 3 years has been extremely hard. So try to, and at the same time, people are always killing themselves constantly. Simply constantly. I remember when I was working with my colleagues at Geeks for Geeks that they had my same age, 21, 22 years old, but they were far away from me in a positive way. They already have some kind of certifications in main cloud provider like AWS or Azure itself. When when cloud was getting more popular and more popular, even before all those courses would come up. So you see that you don't have to look just the person which is sitting next to you. You have to always have a kind of a broader overview of the market conditions, what is happening at the national level, what is happening in the company you are going to apply for, who are the people who are going to apply within the same company. At Microsoft, even for Microsoft Prague, you don't have any kind of limitations in terms of who can apply, of course, to a specific role. So if there is another person, based in India who already has nicer background and more experience than you need to make sure that you are able to outperform that candidate at least as much as you can. And that's why always having a broader overview of what is happening around the world, or at least within your market or your industry, can help you out, increase your chances of success, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think as well that people like it, the kind of university level and entry levels, they can often disregard the market because it seems you kind of just assume that what's going to happen next, that you're going to, get the job and blah, blah, blah. But as you say, like, all these black swan events are just stacking up. And for the way to get through that, a good point I think you mentioned is like instead of doing hours and hours of bar work, is to teach yourself skills to make yourself more competitive in where you want to go, the direction you want to get in. Because, an hour spent on trying to go in the direction you want to go in is probably worth more than the hour that you're going to get, a tenner or something.
Absolutely. Even less than that.
Yeah.
So, no, that was there's a nice book called "So Good They Can't Ignore You," which actually explain what
What's it called?
compound. So good they can't ignore you, which
yeah.
literally explain how in the longer term or even in the medium term, compounding effort and learning will help you to achieve a certain scenario, situations, and the fact that at the end of the day, even struggling is part of the process, even fearing actual imposter syndrome is part of the process. The core things to know is that you are just getting out of your comfort zone. This is part of the process itself, and you just need to put your thoughts together and be able just to go through that specific scenario, situation, or moment of your life.
Absolutely. I think that is a brilliant point to end on. Thanks so much for coming on, Davide. Appreciate it.
Wow. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. That was a nice chat, honestly. That was a nice chat.